Lightning split the sky above Highway 101 at 2:47 in the morning. The kind of lightning that turned night into violent noon for 1 electric second, then dropped everything back into darkness worse than before. Rain hammered the asphalt in sheets, steam rising from the hot pavement where a black Mercedes lay twisted against the concrete barrier, its driver's side crushed like a soda can. The engine was burning. Flames crawled from beneath the hood with the patience of something hungry and alive. Inside the car, Nicholas Vitale gripped the steering wheel with hands that had ordered 43 murders and buried 3 bodies with his own 2 hands. 6'2", broad shoulders straining against a tailored Armani suit now torn open to reveal a white shirt soaked crimson. Dark hair matted with blood. A scar ran from his left eye to his cheekbone like a lightning bolt that had struck him years ago and never left. He was 34 years old and looked like a man who had already died once and simply refused to stay buried. The impact had crushed his ribs. Every breath felt like drowning in thick water. His vision swam. He could smell gasoline pooling beneath the chassis, hot metal singing in the rain, his own blood mixing with the burnt smell of rubber and electrical fire. The door was jammed. His hand slipped on the handle. Sweat and blood made everything slick. The flames spread from the engine compartment, orange and hungry, eating the darkness 1 inch at a time. This is how it ends, he thought. Not at the hands of a rival. Not in a basement with a bullet in the back of the skull. Alone in a burning car on a highway where no one knew his name. Then a shape moved through the smoke. A woman emerged from the rain like a ghost. Thin. Impossibly thin. 26 years old but moving like someone much older, shoulders curved inward from years of carrying weight she was never meant to hold. Her black and white maid's uniform clung to her body, soaked through, revealing how little of her there was beneath it. Water streamed from dark hair pulled tight in a braid that was already coming loose. Her face was sharp and pale, eyes wide and dark brown, the kind of eyes that had learned not to expect mercy from this world. Sofia Hartley did not freeze. She did not pull out a cell phone. She did not wait for help. She grabbed a tire iron from the shoulder of the road, where roadside debris always collected, and she smashed the passenger window with a strength born from desperation. Glass exploded inward in a glittering cascade. She climbed into the burning vehicle, her bare arms scraping against jagged edges, and she reached for the 200-pound unconscious man slumped in the driver's seat. His weight was like trying to move a fallen tree. She grabbed under his arms. His suit jacket was hot from the flames creeping closer. The smoke was so thick she couldn't breathe. Her lungs burned. Her eyes watered. But she pulled. She braced her feet against the door frame and she pulled with every muscle in her body, screaming that this was impossible, that she was only a maid who hadn't eaten since yesterday, who had $2 in her pocket and a foreclosure notice burning somewhere in the wreckage of her own life. The flames licked at the edge of the steering wheel. She pulled harder. His body scraped through the passenger window, and she fell backward onto the rain-soaked pavement, dragging him with her. His shoulder caught on the window frame. She twisted, pulling at a different angle, and he came free just as the car erupted. The explosion punched outward like the fist of God. The heat rolled across her skin like the breath of hell itself. Metal shrieked. Glass shattered and flew across the highway in a deadly rain. Sofia collapsed on the wet asphalt beside him, gasping, her hands shaking so violently she couldn't make them stop. Rain fell on her face. The storm was already beginning to pass. Lightning illuminated the burning wreck every few seconds, casting everything in white-hot clarity, then plunging it back into darkness. The man's eyes were closed. Blood ran down his face. His breathing was shallow and rattling, the sound of someone drowning from the inside. He was completely still. For a long moment, Sofia thought she had pulled a dead man from a burning car. She thought she had climbed into an inferno to save a corpse. Then his chest rose. He was alive. She pressed her hands to her chest, feeling her own heart trying to claw its way out of her ribs. Her uniform was torn. Her palms were bleeding from the broken glass. Her mind was empty except for one thought repeating like a prayer: he is alive, he is alive, he is alive. A car pulled over 20 feet away. Then another. Then a third. People emerged into the rain, shouting. One man was already on his phone calling emergency services. A woman wrapped a blanket around Sofia's shoulders, saying words she couldn't hear, couldn't process. Everything sounded like it was happening underwater. Sofia didn't move. She just sat there beside the unconscious man, rain falling on both of them, watching his chest rise and fall. Rise and fall. Proof that he was still in this world. That her decision to stop the car. That her decision to climb into the fire. That her decision to pull a stranger from an inferno had mattered. She didn't know his name. She didn't know that the scarred man with blood running down his face was the reason mothers told their children to lock the car doors. She didn't know that he was the reason ambitious men disappeared and were never seen again. She didn't know that he had ordered enough violence to fill a cemetery, and that he had done it all with a smile and a cold voice like winter grinding teeth. She only knew that he was alive, and she had done that. In a world where everything she touched turned to ash, this one thing had worked out right. But what should have been a simple rescue was about to become something far more complicated. Because Nicholas Vitale never forgot a debt. And saving his life was about to pull Sofia Hartley into a world where mercy is mistaken for weakness, where invisible women are never truly invisible if they catch the eye of the most dangerous man in California, and where one act of courage can destroy everything. Within hours, he would know her name. Within days, she would be living in his mansion. Within weeks, she would understand that the fire she had pulled him from was nothing compared to the fire she was about to step into. If you're still with us, drop a like if this story is hitting you the way it should. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Some stories change you. This one will change the way you think about invisible heroes. Now, let us go back to 3 weeks before the crash, to the morning when Sofia Hartley was still just another invisible woman scrubbing marble floors in a mansion that would soon become a trap and a sanctuary all at once. The Vitale mansion stood on Pacific Heights like a monument to money that had been earned through means the police could never quite prove. 6 stories of limestone and dark wood, windows that cost more than most houses, gates that opened only for people who belonged. Sofia pushed her cleaning cart through the kitchen at 3 in the morning, her bones aching in a way that never quite went away anymore. The cart wheels squeaked against the tile. That was the only sound besides her breathing. She was thin. The kind of thin that came from choosing between food and rent always won. Her uniform hung loose on her frame despite being tailored once, years ago, when her mother was still alive. Her hands were calloused and red from bleach and hot water. Her dark hair was pulled back so tightly it pulled at her temples. But her eyes were still dark and alive, the kind of eyes that hadn't completely given up yet. The foreclosure notice was in her pocket, crumpled and worn from reading it 100 times. 190 days until she lost the apartment. 190 days until Emma had nowhere to sleep. She did the math in her head while she scrubbed the baseboards. $200,000. That was the number burning in her chest. $200,000, or her daughter lived on the street. She had 3 jobs. 3 jobs and still it wasn't enough. The money never stretched far enough. It pooled at the bottom of the bucket, insufficient and sad, like her whole life was a math problem that couldn't be solved. In the east wing of the mansion, where she had not yet been assigned to clean, men were talking in voices that didn't sound like men at all. They sounded like cold things wearing suits. The marble floors of the Vitale mansion stretched like a frozen lake, and Sofia Hartley was on her knees at 3 in the morning, her mop moving in circles that made no sound. The foreclosure notice crumpled in her apron pocket had stopped feeling like paper days ago. It felt like a blade. 190 days. That was what the letter said, written in the kind of official language that meant everything was over. The apartment would be gone. Emma would be gone. Everything would be gone. Sofia's uniform hung loose on her frame, the fabric bunching at her waist where she had lost 12 pounds in 4 months. Choosing between food and rent had left her thin in the way that made people look away. Her dark hair was pulled back so tightly it pulled at her temples, and her hands were raw red from the bleach and hot water and endless scrubbing. She had 3 jobs. The Vitale mansion paid $400 a week. The restaurant at the airport paid minimum wage, which was a joke, which was a cruelty. The overnight cleaning service at the office building paid just enough to make her think she might survive. She did the math constantly, obsessively, the way a prisoner counts the days to release, except her release date was the day she became homeless. $2. That was what remained in her apron pocket. $2 and a Metro card with exactly 3 rides left on it, which meant 3 rides to see Emma before the card ran out. 3 rides back. She had borrowed from her mother 3 times this month already, and her mother worked as a nurse's aide at county hospital, making barely more than nothing herself. Every dollar Sofia asked for came from her mother's grocery fund. Every dollar made her feel like she was stealing from her own child. The library was on the 2nd floor. Sofia had not been assigned to clean it yet this week, but the baseboards needed attention and nobody else would notice if she finished them now. The rolling cart squeaked as she pushed it across the foyer, past the grand staircase with its runner of Persian silk that probably cost more than the entire building where she lived. The house was silent. The kind of silence that belonged to people who had so much money they could afford quiet, who didn't need to talk because their possessions did the talking for them. Limestone. Dark wood. Oil paintings in gilded frames. Windows that looked out onto the San Francisco Bay like the view belonged to someone. The library doors were closed. Sofia pushed them open and the hinges whispered. She pulled her cart inside and knelt in front of the baseboards near the mahogany shelves. The wood was cool beneath her knees. She had brought her bucket and her brush and the industrial-strength cleaner that burned her throat if she wasn't careful, and she was moving the brush in methodical strokes when she heard the voices. They were coming from somewhere else in the house, but they were getting closer, and they didn't sound like the voices that belonged in this place. These voices were hard. These were the kind of voices that men used when they meant something, when there were guns in the room, and there were always guns in this house, though Sofia had learned not to think about that. She had learned not to think about most things. Footsteps. Multiple sets, moving through the corridor toward the library. Sofia froze. Her brush dripped onto the baseboards. She didn't move to clean it. The voices grew louder, and then the library doors were opening and 2 men were entering, and behind them was a 3rd man who looked terrified, who was actually shaking, whose face had gone the color of old newspaper. The 2 men in front were Marco and Enzo. Sofia knew them by sight only, the way you know dangerous things by sight, the way you recognize the coiled posture of a snake before it strikes. Marco was broad-shouldered, his neck thick as a tree trunk, with a scar running from his right eyebrow to his jawline like someone had carved him open once and sewn him back together wrong. He wore a suit that probably cost $3,000, charcoal gray with a white shirt, and beneath the shirt was the shoulder holster she could see the outline of. Enzo was thinner, darker, with slick-back hair and cold eyes that didn't look at anything the way normal people looked. He was smoking, and the ash from his cigarette fell onto the Persian runner without him noticing or caring. The 3rd man was the accountant. Sofia didn't know his name, but she had seen him in the house before, always looking nervous, always carrying files. Now he was being pushed backward toward the bookshelves by Marco's hand on his chest, and he was saying something, begging something, his voice broken into pieces. Please, I have a family. I have 3 kids. Please, I didn't steal anything. I swear to God I didn't steal anything. His name tag said Robert. Robert from accounting. He was probably 40 years old, probably had a wife waiting somewhere, probably had never imagined his life would end like this, in a library that smelled like old books and lemon furniture Polish, with 2 men who looked like violence wearing suits. Marco's hand moved to his waist. The movement was casual, the way you might reach for your phone, except what he was reaching for was a Glock 9mm that lived in the leather holster beneath his arm. He withdrew it with one smooth motion, the kind of motion that comes from practice, from repetition, from a life spent pulling guns on terrified people. The barrel caught the light from the chandelier above. He chambered around. The sound was sharp and final, like a door closing on someone's life. Last chance to remember what you stole, Marco said. His voice was low and even, like he was discussing the weather. Sofia moved before she had time to think. She stood up, her knees protesting, her hand still wet from the cleaning bucket, and she stepped directly between Marco and Robert. The library seemed to tilt. She could feel the gun in the space where her chest was. She could feel how easily it would solve them all: Marco, Enzo, Robert, herself, all the unsolved problems of money and time and rent. She could feel it the way she could feel her daughter's fever last month, burning through her small body, burning through Sofia's ability to work, costing her a day's wages. "You will not do this," Sofia said. Her voice came out shaking, which was fine because her bones were shaking too, her whole body vibrating with the knowledge of what she had just done. She was nobody. She was a maid. She was the girl who scrubbed the baseboards at 3 in the morning, and she had just stepped in front of a gun held by a man who made decisions about whether people lived or died, and she had done it anyway. "You will not do this. Not while I am standing here." Marco's eyes widened. Enzo took a step back, his cigarette pausing in front of his mouth. Robert made a sound that might have been a prayer or might have been her name, though she didn't know her name was anything to him. Then the footsteps came from the hallway, slow and measured, the kind of footsteps that belonged to someone who owned the silence, who didn't need to hurry because the world would wait. The library doors swung open without anyone touching them, as if the man approaching had such authority that doors obeyed him. Nicholas Vitale stood in the doorway, and the light behind him made him look like something carved from shadow. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a suit of such expensive black it seemed to absorb the light instead of reflecting it. His hair was dark with silver at the temples, slicked back from a face that looked like it had been formed by someone who wanted to create something beautiful and then decided to make it dangerous instead. He had eyes like winter, like the part of the year when things die and nothing grows. There was a scar running from the corner of his left eye to his cheekbone, white and old, the kind of scar that told a story nobody lived long enough to hear all the way through. He was 41 years old and he had built an empire that stretched across San Francisco and down the coast, and he had done it by being the kind of man who looked at defiance and erased it the way you erase a pencil mark. He had murdered his own father when he was 16 years old, had watched the blood pool on the warehouse floor, had decided in that moment that mercy was a mistake and vengeance was the only currency that mattered. Everything he had built since then was a monument to that single decision. He stood in the doorway and he looked at Sofia, and she understood without being told that she had made a mistake so profound it was almost beautiful. "Lower the gun, Marco," Nicholas said. His voice was deep and solid like an oath, like something sworn in blood. Marco's hand dropped immediately. The gun went back into the holster. Robert collapsed backward against the bookshelf, his legs giving up, his whole body folding like something deflated. "Let him go," Nicholas said. But Enzo began. "I don't care what he is. Let him walk out of this house. He keeps breathing. He keeps living. That's what happens now." Nicholas didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The words had weight. They had mass. They had the kind of authority that comes from never being questioned, never being challenged, never being anything but obeyed. Robert ran. He actually ran, stumbling past Nicholas and toward the hallway, his footsteps chaotic and desperate. Sofia listened to them fade. She listened to a door open somewhere below. She listened to silence return. Nicholas was still looking at her. 7 seconds passed. In those 7 seconds, Sofia felt her life reorganize itself. She felt the future that had been coming collapse into something else entirely. She felt the moment hinge, felt it tip, felt it transform into something unfamiliar. Then he turned away. He walked back toward the hallway without speaking, without touching her, without acknowledging that anything unusual had happened. Marco and Enzo exchanged a look that Sofia understood meant something, meant perhaps that in all their years of working for this man, they had never seen him do this, had never seen him stop, had never seen him choose anything other than completeness and vengeance. They followed him. The library became quiet again. Sofia sank to her knees and realized she was shaking so badly she couldn't hold the mop. She held it anyway. She kept holding it until her hands remembered how to move, and then she began to scrub, pushing the brush across the baseboards in circles that meant nothing, in movements that were only habit and survival, in this room where something had changed the weight of the air itself. The highway stretched black and empty at 2:30 in the morning. Lightning split the sky like a blade through silk, and the rain came down in sheets so thick that the world became nothing but water and roaring sound. Nicholas Vitale's black sedan cut through the deluge, his hand steady on the wheel, his mind already 12 hours ahead to the next meeting, the next negotiation, the next moment where power would be tested. He did not see the headlights behind him until they were almost upon him. The SUV hit from behind with the force of a hammer striking steel. Nicholas felt his car lurch, felt the steering wheel tear away from his grip, felt the world begin to spin in a sickening rotation that would not stop. The guardrail came up to meet him like a blade wrapped in ice. Metal screamed against metal. The sedan flipped once, twice, and in the moment between the second flip and the impact that followed, Nicholas Vitale, the man who had murdered his own father's killers one by one, who had built an empire on vengeance and fear, felt something he had not felt since childhood. He felt helpless. The car erupted in flames. Gasoline fumes choked the air. Fire crawled across the windshield like a living thing, eating through the glass, consuming everything. Smoke filled the sedan. His ribs screamed with pain. His vision darkened at the edges. And then hands were pulling at his jacket. Someone was screaming his name, or maybe screaming something else entirely, and those hands would not let go. Fingers locked beneath his armpits. A voice that belonged to no one he knew, no one in his world, was saying, I've got you, don't you dare stop breathing. The heat was unbearable. Glass cut into his palms where he tried to push away from the flames. Smoke poured into his lungs. Every breath was fire. But the hands kept pulling. He crashed onto the wet pavement 3 feet from the burning sedan. Rain soaked through his suit. His ribs erupted in agony with each inhale. He tried to open his eyes, but the smoke had damaged them, and everything was a blur of red and orange. Above him, kneeling in the rain, was a figure he could not quite see. A woman. Young. Drenched. Her hands were shaking. She tilted his head back. She placed her palms flat on his chest and began pressing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times with a rhythm that sounded like desperation. She was performing CPR on a stranger in the rain while a car burned 20 feet away. She was crying. She was terrified. And she would not stop. Come on, she whispered. Come on, please, come on. Nicholas coughed. Once, twice, a violent eruption of smoke and bile and survival instinct. His eyes flew open and he saw her, really saw her, a young woman with dark hair plastered to her face, with cuts bleeding on her forearms, with an expression that contained nothing but fierce determination to keep him breathing. What is your name? He tried to say, but the words came out as a rasp. Don't talk. Help is coming. I called them. Just hold on. The sirens were audible now, still distant but growing closer. The woman sat back on her heels, her chest heaving, her entire body shaking with shock. She looked at her own hands as if they belonged to a stranger. Blood dripped from the cuts on her arms. Gasoline had burned sections of her shirt. But she was breathing. They were both breathing. The ambulance arrived at 2:47 in the morning. The paramedics rushed past Sofia and surrounded Nicholas, loading him onto a stretcher, calling out vital signs and injuries in a language of emergency that seemed to belong to a different world than the one Sofia inhabited. An officer approached her and began asking questions. Name, address, what had she been doing on the highway at this hour, why had she stopped, how did she know him? Sofia answered in fragments. She was driving home from a double shift. She saw the fire. She could not just drive past. She did not tell them who he was. She did not realize that by the time the officer filed the report, someone would cross-reference the license plates and learn that the car belonged to a man named Nicholas Vitale, a name that meant something to every police officer in the city. She did not understand that she had just pulled from a burning vehicle a person whose identity could not be safely acknowledged in an official report. She disappeared before anyone asked for her full name. 3 days passed. Sofia returned to her shifts at the mansion, pushing the mop across marble floors at 3 in the morning, scrubbing baseboards that would be invisible to everyone except the people who cleaned them. She had wrapped her burned forearms in bandages and wore long sleeves despite the heat of the mansion's kitchen. No one asked questions. No one ever asked the help about their injuries or their lives or their reasons for anything. The morning of the 4th day, Marco appeared in the hallway while Sofia was refilling the supply cart. His expression was unreadable. He was a large man with a scar running from his left eyebrow to his jaw, and when he moved, he carried the weight of someone accustomed to violence. He said only, "Mr. Vitale wants to see you in his study. Now." Sofia's heart rate spiked. She had been expecting this. She had been dreading this for 72 hours. She climbed the mahogany staircase with her hands trembling. The mansion was quiet except for the sound of her footsteps on the carpet runner. Nicholas's study was on the 3rd floor, a room of floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and dark wooden windows overlooking the bay. He sat behind a desk the size of a small car, his chest bandaged beneath his white shirt, his face still bearing the marks of the fire. One side of his neck had a burn that ran down beneath his collar. His left hand was wrapped in gauze up to the knuckles. When he looked at her, something shifted in his expression. "Close the door," he said. She did. The sound was soft but final. "You were on Highway 101 at 2:30 in the morning," he said. It was not a question. "Yes," Sofia whispered. "You pulled me from a burning vehicle." "Yes." Nicholas stood. The movement was careful, controlled, but she could see the pain it cost him. He walked to the window overlooking San Francisco and stood there without speaking for so long that Sofia wondered if the conversation was over, if she had just been dismissed, if she should simply leave and wait for whatever came next. "Why?" he finally asked. "Because you were dying. Because I could help. Because?" She stopped. How did she explain that in her world, where everything was taken, where every resource was rationed, where survival meant looking the other way and keeping your head down, she could not ignore someone burning? "Because I could not just drive past," she finished. Nicholas turned to face her. His eyes were storm gray, and they contained something she did not have a name for, something that looked almost like respect, almost like pain, almost like recognition. "What do you need?" he asked. "I'm sorry. You saved my life. In my world, that creates a debt that must be paid. Tell me what you need, and I will give it to you." Sofia's hands were shaking. She shook her head. "I don't want anything. I want to keep my job. I want to work and go home to my daughter and survive. That's all I need." Nicholas Vitale studied her for so long that she began to feel transparent, as if he could see through her skin to the desperate machinery running beneath, the constant calculation of how to make $2 stretch to cover formula and rice and heat for 1 more week. "You are going to need more than that," he finally said, and he turned back to the window. The conversation was over. Sofia understood the dismissal and made her way to the door, but his voice stopped her before she could open it. "What is your daughter's name?" "Emma," Sofia said. "She's 4. Nicholas nodded slowly, his silhouette outlined against the window, against the city that sprawled below them like a kingdom he had built and controlled through will and violence and fear. "Go," he said quietly. "I will be in touch." 2 days later, Sofia found an envelope on her cleaning cart. Inside was a cashier's check for $200,000. The note, written in handwriting that was precise and careful, read simply, "The debt is paid." She did not understand what she held. She did not understand for a full minute while she stood in the hallway, staring at the numbers, unable to comprehend that a piece of paper could contain that many zeros. The $200,000 that had burned in her chest every night since the foreclosure notice arrived. The sum that represented escape, that represented her daughter's future, that represented every breath she could take without drowning. Sofia walked upstairs and pushed open the door to Nicholas's study without knocking. She threw the check on his desk and told him exactly what she thought of his charity. The kitchen of the Vitale mansion at 2:48 in the morning was a place of stainless steel and silence, fluorescent lights humming their lonely song above marble counters that stretched like a frozen lake. Sofia had been alone for 3 hours, scrubbing the baseboards of the East Wing pantry when she heard footsteps, heavy, unsteady, the sound of someone who had been drinking for days. Anthony Marchetti appeared in the doorway like a storm cloud given a human shape. He was 52 years old but looked older, his face bloated with entitlement and rage, his silk shirt unbuttoned halfway down his chest, showing pale skin and the soft belly of a man who had never worked for anything in his life. A gold Rolex caught the kitchen light as he steadied himself against the doorframe. Sofia knew who he was. Everyone in the mansion knew to stay invisible when Anthony was present. "You," he said, his voice thick and dangerous. "Come here." She did not come closer. She set down her scrub brush and straightened, her hands trembling slightly. The foreclosure notice had burned in her apron pocket for so long that she could almost feel its heat even now, even after Nicholas's check had promised her escape. She had learned in 26 years of survival not to move toward men who spoke like that. "Mr. Marchetti, I am finishing the baseboards. I will be out of your way in." I said, "Come here." He stepped into the kitchen, and the air went cold, the way air goes cold before a window breaks. Anthony moved toward her like a blade through water, inevitable and slow. "You have been playing a very dangerous game, little housemaid. Flirting with my uncle. Making him soft. Making him forget what he is." Sofia backed away. The counter pressed against her spine. "I have done nothing. I am nobody. I just clean." "Exactly," Anthony said. "Nobody. A piece of garbage. A thing." He grabbed her wrist with one hand and his grip was like a vice, like bone trying to crush bone. "But my uncle has made you into something else. He has made you important. And that makes you useful." She tried to pull away. His fingers dug deeper. "The FBI," Anthony continued, his breath reeking of whiskey and cigarettes, "wants to burn him down. They have been trying for 15 years. And you know what they want to do. They want you to wear a wire. They want you to betray him, to sit in his study and record his words and sign his death warrant." Anthony's other hand came up and he grabbed her throat. "Or they will take Emma. Do you understand? Your daughter. They will take her from you and put her somewhere you will never find her." Sofia's eye went wide. The world seemed to tilt. "No," she whispered. "No, please?" "Yes," Anthony hissed. "And here is what you are going to do. You are going to call them back and tell them yes. You are going to wear that wire. You are going to destroy Nicholas Vitale so completely that his empire crumbles into dust. And if you refuse, if you tell him any of this, Emma disappears. Do you believe me?" She believed him. She could feel it in his grip, in the absolute certainty that he would follow through because men like Anthony Marchetti never made threats they could not keep. The foreclosure notice suddenly seemed small, a minor catastrophe compared to the chasm opening beneath her feet. "Say yes," Anthony demanded, shaking her. "Say yes or I swear to God I will make sure she starves." Sofia's head struck the counter as he shook her. Once. Twice. The world fractured into light and pain. She brought her arm up and tried to push him away, but he was stronger, so much stronger, and his hands moved from her throat to her face. His fist came up and connected with her left eye, and the pain was white and all-consuming, like being struck by lightning, like having her head shattered from the inside out. She screamed. He hit her again. And again. Her hands came up to protect herself, but he was relentless, driven by years of watching Nicholas choose her, and each blow was filled with the fury of a man who had never been chosen at all. "Nobody," he said with each punch. "Nobody. Nobody." She fell. Her knees struck tile and the impact sent pain radiating up her legs. Anthony stood over her, breathing hard, his knuckles bleeding. He grabbed her hair and yanked her head up so she had to look at him. "You belong to me now," he whispered. His voice was the voice of a curse, of something that could not be erased. You will wear that wire. You will betray him. Or Emma dies. Do you understand? Sofia could barely breathe. Her left eye was swollen shut, her vision narrowing to a single tunnel. Her throat felt crushed, her lips tasted of blood and broken teeth. She understood. She understood with the clarity of a woman who had just been shown the bottom of the world. Anthony released her and stepped back. He looked down at her broken on the floor like she was something he had stepped on by accident. I will contact you with instructions, he said. Then he turned and left, his footsteps fading down the hallway, leaving Sofia alone on the cold tile with her breath coming in ragged gasps and the taste of her own blood filling her mouth. She lay there for a long time. Minutes passed, each one stretching like an hour. The kitchen lights hummed their indifferent song. Somewhere in the mansion, Nicholas was asleep, unaware that his nephew had just remade the world into a place of impossible choices. Emma was asleep in the safe bed that Sofia had finally been able to afford. The foreclosure notice that had haunted her was gone, but this was infinitely worse. This was her daughter's life hanging in the balance. Sofia dragged herself to the staff bathroom and looked in the mirror. She did not recognize the woman staring back at her. Her left eye was swollen completely shut, purple blooming into black, the skin splitting open in 3 places. Handprint bruises wrapped around her throat like a necklace of violence, dark and deep and unmistakable. Her lip was split. Blood ran from her nose. She looked like a woman who had been hunted. She cleaned the blood from her face. She held paper towels filled with ice against her eye. And then she walked out into the night. The summer thunderstorm that had been threatening all week finally broke as Sofia left the mansion. Rain fell in sheets, cold and hostile, the sky cracking open with lightning that turned the world white for a single instant. The wind tore through the grounds like a blade wrapped in ice, and she welcomed it, welcomed the pain of it, because at least the storm was honest. The storm did not pretend to be something it was not. She walked through the downpour toward the iron gates that separated the Vitale estate from the world beyond, and with each step the rain soaked through her uniform and into her bones. At 2:02 a.m., Sofia stood at those gates and looked through them at the city beyond. The streets were empty. No cars moved. No one walked. It was as if the world had ended and left her alone at the border. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands. She typed her mother's number and deleted it. Typed it again and deleted it again. Her mother was already raising herself to poverty on Sofia's behalf, already running on prayers and caffeine and the kind of love that burns you from the inside out. If she called and told her to take Emma and run, where would they go? How would they survive? The foreclosure had taken everything. There was nothing left to build on. The lightning cracked overhead, and in that moment of white-hot brightness, Sofia thought about disappearing. She thought about walking into the rain and never coming back, about letting Anthony believe she had run away, about hoping his attention would shift to someone else. She thought about all the small deaths she had already died, the jobs she did not get, the apartment she could not afford, the nights Emma cried because she was hungry and there was no formula left. She thought about the foreclosure notice, about the way the world had crushed her again and again until she became nothing. But then she remembered the diner. She remembered sitting across from Nicholas at a small table in a place that smelled like coffee and broken dreams, and she remembered him telling her about his father, about the day he was 17 and full of rage, about the night he learned that sometimes the only way to survive is to become something harder than the thing that is trying to break you. She remembered his face when he said it, the raw honesty that she had not seen in another human being in years, the vulnerability of a man admitting that his own darkness was necessary. And she understood, standing at the gates in the rain, that she could not run. Because Emma deserved a mother who stood up even when it was terrifying. Emma deserved to learn that sometimes the invisible people carry the greatest light. Sofia walked back into the mansion. Her uniform clung to her skin, soaked and heavy. Water dripped from her hair and pooled on the marble floors. She did not go to the staff quarters. She walked directly to Nicholas's study on the 2nd floor, her footsteps leaving wet print on the carpet. She did not knock. She pushed open the door. Nicholas was sitting at his desk, still awake at 3:15 a.m., surrounded by papers and the blue glow of a computer screen. Marco and Enzo were in the leather chairs near the fireplace, playing chess without speaking. All three men looked up as she entered, drenched and broken and bearing the unmistakable marks of violence on her skin. Nicholas rose slowly from his chair. He crossed to her in 3 strides and his hands came up but did not touch her, hovering inches from her face as if she might shatter. His eyes, those dark, penetrating eyes that had seen 15 years of blood and betrayal, went completely still. The expression that moved across his face was something Marco had never seen before and would never see again, complete and utter rage tempered by the softest protection. "Who?" Nicholas's voice was low and steady, like thunder before a storm. "Tell me who did this." "Your nephew," Sofia said. The words came out broken, her throat screaming with pain. "Anthony." She watched the moment when his face went cold, when the expression of a man who was terrified for her transformed into the expression of a man who was 17 years old again, hunting his father's killers. He turned to Marco without a word. Marco stood immediately, as if his body had been waiting for this signal for hours. "Find him," Nicholas said quietly. "Gather the necessary leverage." Marco nodded and left the study. Enzo followed a moment later, and then Sofia was alone with Nicholas Vitale in the blue glow of his desk lamp, and he was moving toward her again, gently this time, lifting her face to examine the damage. At 5:41 a.m., as dawn broke gray and tentative over San Francisco, the federal raid came like a thunderclap. 12 FBI agents in black tactical gear smashed through the door of Anthony Marchetti's penthouse apartment on the waterfront. Glass shattered. Furniture splintered. Shouts echoed off concrete walls. Anthony was dragged from his bed in nothing but his underwear, screaming about his rights, about his uncle, about how they could not possibly do this to him. But they did. The agents read him his charges as they forced his wrists into handcuffs: racketeering, assault, conspiracy, tax evasion, money laundering, violations of federal organized crime statutes. 40 years. The words hung in the apartment like a death sentence, and Anthony collapsed to his knees, trembling like a cornered animal who has finally understood that there is no escape. He screamed his uncle's name. He begged. He promised anything, everything, his entire fortune, his properties, his life. None of it mattered. The agents hauled him downstairs in nothing but handcuffs and underwear, and cameras from 3 news stations captured every second. His face, twisted in desperation and rage. His body, soft and defenseless. His fall from grace happening in real time, broadcast live to every screen in the city. Meanwhile, at that same hour, FBI agents were pulling up to Evelyn Blackwell's mansion in Nob Hill. She answered the door in a silk robe, her face still beautiful but now confused, still carrying the armor of her social position but for the first time in her life uncertain whether that armor would hold. It did not. The agents presented the documents with the precision of surgeons wielding scalpels. Bribes to federal judges. Insider trading worth $3 million. Tax evasion spanning 15 years. Shell corporations and offshore accounts. Every piece of corruption that she had carefully hidden laid bare in black and white. Evelyn's perfect facade crumbled like ancient stone. She screamed at the agents. She demanded to call her lawyers. She insisted there had been a mistake, that she was a woman of standing, that people like her did not go to federal prison. But they did. The cameras captured her being led out in handcuffs, her robe falling open, her face streaked with tears, the perfect socialite unraveling in real time. Her friends called within the hour, not with sympathy but with cancellations. Her charities removed her name from their boards. Her husband filed for divorce via his lawyer before lunch. Nicholas watched both arrests on monitors in his study, images streaming from a network of contacts that he had cultivated over 15 years. Sofia sat beside him with an ice pack pressed against her eye. Her face was a map of violence but her hands had stopped shaking. She watched Evelyn being led out in handcuffs and felt nothing. Absolutely nothing. The woman who had spread lies about her, who had tried to destroy her credibility before she could even testify, was now the subject of every gossip column in the city. Nicholas turned to look at Sofia. His voice was the color of steel. This is what happens to people who hurt what is mine. Justice is not death. Death would be too quick, too easy, too merciful. This is better. Federal prison. 40 years for your nephew. 15 for her, minimum. Public humiliation. Total destruction. They will spend the rest of their lives remembering what they did to you. Sofia looked at him and asked the question that had been burning in her chest since the moment he saved her. What am I to you that you would do this? Nicholas studied her for a long moment. The ice pack had slipped and he could see the full extent of the damage Anthony had done, could see the swelling and the darkness and the handprint bruises that might never fully fade. He reached out and very gently repositioned the ice pack, his fingers barely touching her skin. I am still figuring that out, he said finally. Outside, the storm had passed. The sun was rising over San Francisco in shades of gold and amber, burning away the rain clouds, and for the first time in days, Sofia could breathe. 1 year later, Sofia Hartley stood on a penthouse balcony 42 stories above San Francisco, the city light spreading below her like fallen stars scattered across black velvet. The November night was clear and cold, the kind of cold that sharpened everything into focus. She wore a tailored charcoal business suit, the fabric soft against her skin, the kind of suit she could never have afforded when she was scrubbing marble floors at 3 in the morning. Her hair was pulled back cleanly. Her eye had healed. The handprint bruises on her throat had faded to almost nothing. The $200,000 Nicholas had given her, money she had not wanted to take, money she had tried to refuse 3 times before understanding that refusal would hurt him, had saved her mother's house from foreclosure. The crumpled notice that had burned in her apron pocket 1 year ago now sat framed on her mother's wall, a monument to survival. Emma was enrolled in private school with proper asthma medication and regular checkups. Sofia's consulting firm, House of Hope, had grown beyond anything she had imagined possible. She helped working women escape poverty through financial literacy and job training. 47 women had found stable employment in the past 8 months. She was finally free. Finally building something real. The glass door behind her whispered open. Sofia turned and her breath caught. Nicholas Vitale stood in the doorway wearing the same black suit, the same silver rings on his dark fingers, the same scar running like a blade from his eye to his cheekbone. But his expression was different. His dark eyes held something she had not seen before. Uncertainty. He looked like a man who had rehearsed his words 1,000 times and forgotten every single one. I should not be here, he said. His voice was the color of steel. Sofia did not move. And yet you are. Yes. He stepped onto the balcony and closed the door behind him. The city hummed 42 stories below. I have spent the past year keeping my distance. Making sure you and Emma were safe. Making sure no one threatened you. Staying away from both of you because I am a man who built his entire life on vengeance and violence, and you are the only good thing I have ever been close to. He paused. The wind moved his dark hair. I did not want to ruin that. Sofia watched him. She thought about the night she had pulled him from the burning car, flames reflected in his eyes, his body limp against her as she dragged him from the wreckage. She had not known who he was. She had acted because it was right. Because some choices live deeper than survival. Nicholas, she said quietly. Why are you telling me this now? He looked at her for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because I am tired of standing in the shadows. Because I have spent 25 years believing that strength meant never needing anyone, and you proved me wrong in 7 seconds. He took 1 step closer. When you stood between Marco and Enzo and that accountant, when you screamed that they would not do this, I felt something break inside me that had been frozen since I was 14 years old. Something like hope. Something like the possibility that I was not completely hollow. Sofia's hands trembled. She clasped them together. I have carried one truth since that night in the library, Nicholas continued. You were the only person who ever stood against me without fear. Not because you were brave, but because you did not yet understand what I was. You saw only a man about to commit a sin, and you stepped in front of him. That act of courage changed everything. What happens now? Sofia asked. Nicholas looked at her with those dark, penetrating eyes. That is entirely up to you. I will not force you. I will not manipulate you. I will not use my power or my money to make you choose me. If you want me to disappear, I will. If you want me to stay, I am here. She stepped closer to him. The space between them crackled like the moment before lightning strikes. She could smell the scent of his cologne, something expensive and dark, like smoke and leather and winter rain. I am not looking for someone to save me, Sofia said. I saved myself. I know, Nicholas replied. His voice held something like reverence. That is precisely why I am here. From inside the penthouse, a child's voice called out. Mommy? Where are you? Sofia's heart lifted. That word still caught her. Mommy. Emma, her beautiful 7-year-old daughter with copper curls and asthma that was finally under control, had called her that for the first time 6 months ago, suddenly, without warning, as if she had always known it was her right to do so. Sofia had cried for an hour. We are out here, baby, Sofia called back. The glass door opened and Emma appeared, wearing her pink pajamas with the stars on them. Behind her was Sofia's mother, Margaret, holding 2 cups of hot chocolate. Margaret's eyes widened slightly when she saw Nicholas, but she said nothing. She had learned long ago not to ask questions. She simply smiled and set the hot chocolate on the small table beside the lounge chairs. Come, Sofia said, gesturing to Nicholas. I want you to meet someone. Emma padded across the balcony in her bare feet, unafraid, the way children are when they have been loved well. She studied Nicholas with the analytical gaze of a 7-year-old examining a new species. This is Emma, Sofia said. Emma, this is Nicholas. He is a friend. Mommy said you helped her when she was scared, Emma said matter-of-factly. Nicholas knelt down to Emma's eye level. He moved slowly, deliberately, the way you would approach a frightened animal. Your mother is very brave, he said. She did not let fear stop her from doing what was right. Emma nodded solemnly. She held out a piece of paper that had been folded and refolded so many times it was soft as cloth. I made this. Colors for sad days. When she feels sad, look at this. The drawing was a riot of color, yellows and oranges and brilliant reds, crayon scrawled in the wild, joyful way of children. Sun rising over mountains. A small figure with curly hair. A bigger figure beside her with dark hair. Both of them holding hands. Nicholas studied the picture as if it contained the secrets of the universe. When he looked up at Sofia, his eyes were glistening. Sofia watched this dangerous man, this man who had murdered his own father as a teenager, this man who had built an empire on vengeance and blood and ruthless loyalty, soften around her daughter like morning sun dissolving frost. She understood in that moment that maybe people were more complicated than the boxes they were forced into. Maybe a man could be both a killer and capable of reverence. Maybe strength and gentleness were not opposites but partners in the same story. Margaret squeezed Sofia's shoulder as she passed. In that small gesture was everything her mother could not say aloud. She had watched her daughter survive hell. She had watched Sofia pull herself up from nothing and build a life that meant something. And now she watched the most dangerous man in the city kneel before her granddaughter like a supplicant before a saint. Emma yawned. Mommy, can Nicholas stay for breakfast? Sofia and Nicholas looked at each other. A question lived in that look. An answer lived there too. Yes, Sofia said softly. He can stay for breakfast. The city lights burned below them, 10 million lives continuing in their separate stories, completely unaware that on a balcony 42 stories above the street, something small and tender and impossibly strong was being born from the ashes of violence. Emma took Nicholas's hand without hesitation and led him inside to show him her bedroom. Sofia followed, watching this man who had ruled through fear learn how to be ruled by love instead. And in that moment, the narration of their story shifted from tragedy into something that looked almost like grace. How did this story make you feel? Please leave a comment below and share what is in your heart. If you enjoyed this, hit that like button and subscribe so you do not miss what is coming tomorrow. Share this with someone who needs to hear it.